I figured everybody needed to wake up right about now. I don't know if somebody was being my friend or enemy, friend or foe, by putting me on the agenda at 4 o'clock, and I really am a morning person. So I'm just gonna just bear with me. I think you guys talked with somebody in Georgia because my peers always make me go last because I take up all the time. So with that being said, I also know that I am the one standing between you guys and the door. So, amen. And so, first of all, I'm the adoption director for the state of Georgia. I have been in social work for a very long time. I started at the front door doing investigations and ongoing and CPS. I did foster care, I did adoptions, I did the development of foster and adoptive homes. I've even done Rev Max, which is the 4E determination. So I have worn many hats and many positions, but I always found myself back to adoptions. This is where my passion lies. And this is why I chose the topic that I chose. Because I know we're doing a great job in adoptions in Georgia. I've been in my position for 10 years now. And in 10 years, well, about 7-8 years ago, we were down to 749 adoptions a year. In 2019, I am proud to say we finalized 1,420 adoptions. The number of finalized adoptions in our state. So I'm really proud of that. Put some things in place because not only do we want adoptions to happen and to finalize, but we want them to last. I don't want to see children come back. So I address that continuum from the front door all the way to the back door to make sure that our children do not come back into this system. And so I was looking at all of that in my 10 years. I've made some policy changes, some that weren't very popular, some that got overturned when a new administration came in. But we just picked our heads up and we kept moving. We still have to do this work because we owe our kids. At the end of the day, that's who we do this work for. So with my focus on adoptions, I decided, well, we haven't been doing too good in how soon we make it happen. So we did 1,420 adoptions, but we're at 23.5% within 24 months. So that's an area that we're really working to address. We're looking at what the barriers are, but this gives me the opportunity to take a different look and to find out what's really going on and what the role of cultural competence plays and the length of time that it takes to achieve guardianship and adoption for children in foster care. So, what's the issue? Well, child welfare literature, state and national data, everything supports that African American children enter foster care at a higher rate than that of Caucasian children. Everything we have says that. And why? We know that in our readings and in our work, if you've been around this work for a while, that African American families come to the attention of child welfare more frequently than other races. Because a lot of poverty, they have to access services and systems that are mandated reporters. And as a result of that, they get reported more. And I had the opportunity to talk to some of my friends on the CPS investigative side of the house. And I was able to get some data from them as well. That supported not only do we come to the attention more, but at the point that the decision has to be made, Caucasian families will route down the ongoing services path or in-home, family preservation, whatever we want to call it. Been around for a long time. Name has changed a lot. Whereas African American children enter foster care at a higher rate. Okay. We know the other issue is once our children enter foster care, it takes them a little bit longer to exit. And I have the data to support that. So you will see with your own eyes, you don't have to believe me, believe the data, that once they enter foster care, they do stay, and it does take them longer to achieve permanency. And thirdly, African American children, as a result of all those things, are overrepresented in the foster care system not only in Georgia, but in the United States. And I heard many of you today say it also happens in your state. So it's a proven fact that there is disproportionality when it comes to African American children entering the foster care system. And so, I don't even think I have to go through that.
No.
I'm gonna say it y'all for 30 seconds. But we all know the definition of disproportionality and disparity, right? So disproportionality means over or underrepresented in the system or any system. Disparity would be the outcome. So you'll see as I go through the data that the outcomes for African American children in foster care are definitely different than that of Caucasian. And we really have a very, very, very low Hispanic population in Georgia. So we will focus on African American and Caucasian children. So who is impacted by this issue? African American children, right? African American children who don't achieve positive permanency ends up with negative outcomes. We all know that, right? We know the data, we know the stats behind homelessness, incarceration, involved in other systems, teen mothers or pregnancy, high pregnancy rates, poverty, all those things. African American children. African American families, they're broken. Our families end up broken because our children are less likely to return home sometimes. So we're breaking and destroying African American families. So families, African American communities, because who do you think that our broken children return to? They go back to their communities. So who's impacted by the high crime, by the unemployment rates, by homelessness? Who's impacted by that? Our communities. And then overall, our child welfare systems, overwhelmed child welfare systems. When caseloads are high, how effective do you think we can be in delivering services to the families and the children that we serve? Not very effective, right? Because we're overwhelmed with too many cases, reducing the amount of time and energy and resources that we have to service those families that really need to be serviced. So what is believed to contribute to this issue? Cultural bias and incompetence, cultural incompetence are believed to be contributing factors to the reason that African American children leave in foster care, or the reason that there's disproportionality and disparity. I didn't have law up here, but I'm going to say it. Law, policies, practices, values of agency executive level leadership regarding cultural competence. And I'm going to spend a little more time on that later on. And lack of cultural competence of staff throughout the agency, the judicial system, and other community partners. When I started off this project, I started off saying I was just going to focus on executive level leadership. And Sharon Lynn opened my eyes and said, well, do you think it's just them? Do you think maybe there's some other people involved? And I was like, well, yeah, but we were able to come to a PICO. To share with you regarding the outcome of our data, of our surveys, and of our tests, to really kind of help you all see where Georgia sits when it comes to being culturally competent. So, cultural competence, we have the society level, the system level, and the individual level. I chose to put that up there because society means your governing bodies. Do we have diversity and cultural competence addressed in our strategic plans? You know, is it written anywhere? So on the society level, does our governing body address this? System level, does our mission statement, our goals, our other plans, does it address it as a system? And then individually, are we living it if our system addresses it, right? So those are the three things that when we really wanted to chime in on our individual, because there are some things that individuals can do once they recognize what the system issues may or may not be. So my intervention strategy, was to provide individual level cultural competence training. Because we wanted people to measure where they are at the beginning and where you are at the end. Because even if your system or your organization isn't addressing it, there are things that individuals can do to start addressing the issues of cultural competence. So, this lovely PICO. If child welfare leaders, staff, judicial partners, and other communities receive training on cultural competence and fact sheets regarding length of time it takes to achieve adoption/guardianship for African American children in Georgia's foster care system as compared to Caucasian children in the same system of care, will it increase their awareness, knowledge, and perception with a long-term goal of improved outcomes for African American children in foster care? So we all know we didn't have enough time to really implement a strategy that would allow for us to see what the long-term impact could be. But some of us won't stop at that, right? We're gonna see this through.
Oh.
All right. And so, research process included data collection and literature review. There's lots and lots and lots of literature out there talking about the disproportionality and disparity issue, as well as cultural competence and the issue itself that relates to why African American children are living in foster care longer. A survey regarding cultural competence, because again, my hypothesis is cultural competence does play a role in the reason that the disparities exist for African American children. And then it was cultural competence training where a pre and post test was administered to those in attendance. So let's look at the data. Like I said, we start with the data. Let's talk about what's out there. So you can see that nationally there are 442,995 children in the foster care system. And of that, 23% are African American and 44% are Caucasian, 21% Hispanic. Just to dig a little deeper to show the disproportionality, you can see in the United States, African American children make up 23% of the child population. Excuse me, of the foster care population, thank you. And African Americans only make up 14% of the child population. Clearly, there's disproportionality. Now, to bring it to a local level, in Georgia, African Americans make up, in foster care system, 45.6% of our foster care population, and only 32% of the children population. Now, I added a little something extra here. 32% of the child population, 45.6% of the foster care population, and 49.8% of our waiting children are African American children. And when we say waiting in Georgia, we mean those without an adoption resource. I know that it expands when we're talking on a national level, but in Georgia, we're talking about those who don't have a resource. Caucasian children are 54% of the child population, 52.71% of the foster care population, and 49.2% of the children waiting. So even, it's just 0.6% or 0.6, but it's still less than that of African American children. So still disproportionality. So, wanted to test out a couple of theories and find out what's going on and why. So we looked at the children who had been in care, children who exited care in a 3-year period of time, and wanted to see how long it took children to exit based on race. As you can see, within 36 months, you can clearly see that 74% of Caucasian children exit in less than 36 months, and 66.12% of African American children exit in less than 36 months. Then you flip it and you look at what the length of time is, or percentage of children who exit after 36 months. The children who it took more than 36 months. And you can clearly see where it flips. African American children exited at 33.88% after 36 months. And 26% for Caucasian children. Just got the halfway sign. Okay. And I'm a third of the way. Okay. So we decided to look at the workforce. Let's look at the workforce and see if that has impact. Let's look at the demographics and the racial breakdown of our workforce and see what impact that may have on it. And you'll see that our workforce is predominantly black, predominantly African American. Almost double the number of African American staff in the state than there is Caucasian. And then when we looked at another population of kids, and those who are in care for more than 24 months, meaning they're still there 24 months later. And again, you can see that 53.58% of African American children remain in care after 24 months, and 46.42% of Caucasian children. So I wanted to break it down by district, just to look at it a little deeper to see, because there are different regions. We have 3 districts in our state, North, South, and Metro. And they all look very different. So we wanted to look at the demographics of the staff versus the outcomes of the children. We see that frontline staff in the South District almost triple the number of Caucasian children. So a highly African American workforce. But you can see that as the positions get higher, the number of African American staff reduces. So you have frontline supervisors still higher in the South District, but when you look at county directors, we have 159 counties in Georgia. So when you look at our county directors, you'll see it's very even at that level. And then when you look at our regional directors, we have 14 regions in the state. In the South District, there's 7 regions. 4 of those regional directors are Caucasian and 3 are African American. So it looks like the higher people become, the higher the position, the fewer African Americans are in those roles. And then we look at, the children in those regions. And the numbers inside represent the number of children that are actually in that region of that race. So 47.7% of African Americans are represented in care over 24 months and 41.27. So just a brief. And then we looked at the South District's detailed data around the number of kids who exit in less than 36 months or more than 36 months. Not gonna spend too much time on this because I'm running out of time. So North District looks very different from Metro District. So you got the North District. You'll see that their frontline staff is a slight difference between Caucasian and African Americans. But you notice theirs start to rise quickly. And then by the time you get to regional directors, you have 0 African American regional directors in the North District. But you look at the outcomes and it looks different, but a majority of their children are Caucasian, okay? So that's why the vast difference is there. Now, looking at the metro area. Oh, did I go the wrong way? Oh, still looking at North. 36, less than 36, more than 36. You can still see, even with that, when it comes to children in care for more than 36 months, there's still a disparity there with the outcomes. Metro District, look how different Metro looks versus other places. Almost their entire workforce is African American. Their leadership, everything is African American. That's the Metro from Atlanta, okay, all of that good stuff. And then regional directors is even, it's pretty evenly split. And then you see the outcomes for African American children still at a higher rate. It takes them to exit foster care. And then again, when we look at the length of time. So it matters not what the racial breakdown is. The outcomes for African American children is the same. So we did a survey. how competent our staff, how culturally, that should have been how culturally competent our staff, how culturally competent is leadership, how culturally competent are our judicial partners, how culturally competent are our service providers, how culturally competent are our policies, how culturally competent are our practices. Sent it out. Of course, we define cultural competence using the National Social Workers Association of Social Workers definition, process by which individuals and systems respond respectively and effectively to people of all cultures, languages, classes, races, ethnic backgrounds, religions, spiritual traditions, immigration status, and other diversity factors in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values the worth of individuals, families, and communities, and protects and preserves the dignity of each. So I thought that was probably the best definition I had run across. So, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. We had 625 respondents on the survey. Now, I cheated. I did it. What did Brittany say? Sometimes you got to incentivize people. So I did. I had a leftover earbuds gift set or something like and just re-gifted it. And I gave them. And so I had people, we had a conference, I did a hard copy survey, and I said, hey, you guys, as you turn this in, you get a ticket, your name goes into the bag, and we'll draw at the end of the week, and the winner wins something. One winner, but they completed those surveys. Right. And then we put so the 338, because the conference had 350, so almost everybody completed, you know. But then we put it online. We did do SurveyMonkey, and I had nothing to offer those people. But we did get 233 providers, and we got 54 foster and adopted parents who responded to the survey. And pretty much what we learned is that everybody stayed safe. Somewhat is always the same answer. I mean, it's always the same answer. I did that just yesterday. No. Everybody decided, let's just say somewhat. Their choices were not competent at all, not too competent, somewhat competent, very competent, and highly competent. And so but I started paying attention to the not too competent and not at all. Because I figured those were the people who were being probably most honest. And so in different areas, we started to see that go up, like with the judicial system. I think we saw an increase with people saying not too competent. So that was interesting. And then state office leadership. The funny thing about that is I have the best relationship, or so I thought, with our foster and adopted parents. They actually rated us pretty high as being not competent or something over there, right there, but they still rated us as very competent. So state office leadership. Then we did policy, to what extent does policy support all cultures, and then does practice, and again, everybody just stayed pretty safe. So next step was to do the cultural competence training. That was a 90-minute training with the objectives of raising awareness of racial disproportionality, provide information on society, systems, and individual level cultural competence, and introduce the concept of implicit bias, which obviously exists based on the data and based on other things. 24 attendees in the training included case managers, supervisors, county, and regional leadership. Training in other areas, we asked them to talk about the areas used in cultural to describe culture, the iceberg concept of cultural competence, the importance of being a culturally competent social worker, the internal and external factors that influence diversity among individuals and groups. Elements of individual level cultural competence, elements of organization, elements of culturally competent system, characteristics of culturally and linguistic competent organizations. So pre-test, the average score was 50. Post-test, 70. Average increase was 20 points, and the highest increase was 50 points. So we did see that there was some progress made. Also, in the pre and post test, we asked them to say how culturally responsive. That's huge. Right. 92% thought that we were culturally competent when we started this training. or at the point that the 90-minute training started, they were like, oh yeah, Georgia, all this, we got this, we have cultural competent. And I had to bust their bubble and give them information about what culturally competent really looks like and what a culturally competent system. I even went through our mission statements, our plans, and just showed them that nowhere did we address diversity or being culturally competent or providing services in a culturally competent way. Nothing, no conversation whatsoever. And so upon the completion, only 13% responded that the agency is still culturally competent. I think those are the ones that may have gone to sleep. Then we did a post-training self-assessment of individual level cultural competence and how much did their level increase. And 71% reported that their level of cultural competence did increase. And then 29% said theirs remained the same. So, what are my conclusions here? Regardless of the racial breakdown of staff, the outcomes for African American children are the same. It still takes African American children longer to exit foster care through adoptions and guardianship than it does Caucasian children. The other thing, self-assessed cultural competence was higher than what others assessed. So going back to the cultural competence survey. There were significantly lower rates of perceived levels of organization. You guys just saw that. Post-test training scores indicating increased levels of knowledge about cultural competence. Many of the participants in the class said, when are you guys going to roll this out statewide? When are you going to change policy? When are you going to do? They had lots of questions about when are we going to start doing something different? And I had to say, down here at Leadership Priorities, and nobody's really paying attention to this but me. And that's because of the project. But I have not heard, and I talk with my peers and coworkers on a regular basis, y'all know that, right? And nobody's talking about cultural competence and the disparities and the disproportionality that exists in the state of Georgia. So we talk about implicit biases and institutionalized bias or racism and the impact that has on our children. So a lot of people had not heard of implicit bias. We did, some work around that to help them understand. It's when you're just not intentional, but you just kind of have formed opinions based on what you think you know about a certain race. We talked about agency that being a factor, the competence level. The higher rate of disproportionality of weighting children being an issue, and then leadership priorities. Our leadership, like I said, have never talked about or discussed this issue to my knowledge. And it was kind of disheartening. I almost thought I was going to have to change my project because right in the middle, we had some major leadership change. And the two African Americans that sat at the top of the org chart were gone and replaced with Caucasian people. And it really hurt me because I was like, well, the first thing about being culturally competent is knowing that you need people sitting at the table making decisions who look like the people you're making decisions for. So how are you sitting here at the table making decisions about 45.6% of the children in foster care and you have nobody who looks like them at the table? So that was yeah. I had to do, that was one of the things I had to talk with Addie and Sharon Lynn about. I was like, talk me down. And Lamar run into her office, girl. But anyway, like I said, and no one is addressing the issue of disproportionality and disparities in Georgia. So some closing insights. My first conversation with Sharon Lynn back in January, I talked with her about, I don't know if they care. I said, I don't want to say this. I don't know how to say this. I said, but I really question if people care. And so I thought this survey went out to all the judges. I went to our juvenile court judge liaison and had him to send the survey out. I got 0 responses. I got some from CASA, from Guardian Ad Litem, but I got nothing from the judges. No responses from the judges. And then it took almost 2 weeks to get the survey posted. Well, now, the first one I did, I asked for forgiveness, not permission, because I need to get it done. And so, because my conference was coming up, and so didn't have any issues. But when I started to circulate it and ask for approval to get it out, because we have processes for this stuff, it's going to be mailed out statewide or whatever, it has to be approved. And it was just taking forever. And I was like, what is the problem? Why can't I get my survey out? I'm calling tomorrow, like, can you help me do something? You know, because I need this survey to go out. And so I think people were very uncomfortable. They were very uncomfortable even talking about it, even having it put out there. And just the fact that the judges just decided not to respond, I thought was very telling. I think those were things that were very telling. And so moving forward, I have a friend, well, young lady who interned with us in adoptions about 20-something years ago. And she's now in the legislature. She's a representative. And she called me up in February last year and asked me to send her a child every day. But she was going to feature a child on the floor of the legislature every day. And so I can do that. And we got her picture and a summary, and she presented a child every day. She plans to make that her mission, her goal, the whole time she's in session. I figured I have a friend. And so I'm looking forward to sharing some information with her. So that because most states who address this issue did it legislatively. You know, Texas and other states, they did it through legislation. So I would like to see somebody at least talking about this and recognizing that this is an issue. We have an increased population of kids in care. If we put some focus on why disparity and disproportionality is going on, then perhaps we can reduce reduce children in foster care, period. So that's one of the things. Then Lamar was working with me to get on executive leadership's agenda to also do a presentation for them so that they can acknowledge and recognize that we in fact have an issue in this great state of Georgia. So, reflection. That's my dining room table on any given day. I'm like, whoa, all this paper. And so, that's the training, just, you know, I know we're going to take pictures. I probably will put on a suit. That's casual Friday. And so when I started, everybody said, wow, Deborah, they know you. You know, you've been around forever. You're on AEA's board. You're this, you know, you've been around, you presented at conferences. Why are you doing this? We see you as a leader already. And I was like, well, you can never grow too much. You know, you can always learn. And that's one thing as a leader you have to know. There's always room for growth, right? Opportunity and room for growth. So I wanted to take, and I did, and I have grown. I think I'm a stronger leader. Abby and Terry Lynn work with me a lot around managing up, and what was helpful, it was more helpful than most people would know. Because like I said, I was struggling with administrative changes and other things that were going on in the agency. You know, there were days that I said, whew, I'm gonna have to quit. I'm gonna have to go and work for families, is what I said. I wanted to work for relatives and birth parents, because nobody's advocating and fighting for them the way that I think that somebody needs to or should. And I was headed home one day and I said, I'm gonna quit. I said, I'm gonna quit and go work for families. Then I remember I had a mortgage. I was like, okay. It's transparency. The transparency. Sharing and adding, you know, just allowing me to be very open and to have those really tough and really transparent conversations and to support me through that. And so, proud to say, I know 2 dynamic women. Sharing and adding, and you guys were really helpful. And so thank you for the opportunity and support. Thank the program, Sharon Lynn,